special this week with a live studio audience in Edinburgh here in an hour. First on BBC One, over to James Cook in Glasgow for the big debate.
In a week's time, Scotland will have voted on its future, whether to stay in the UK or become an independent country. Tonight, we've invited 16 and 17-year-olds given the vote for the first time from every secondary school in Scotland to join a debate on the future of their country. Thousands have come from every corner of Scotland here to the Hydro in Glasgow to question directly those who are campaigning for their support. This is Scotland Decides, the big debate. Welcome to Scotland's newest major music venue. In the coming weeks, it will host the likes of Paolo Nutini and Lady Gaga. But tonight, entertainment of a different sort. We've invited a panel of Scotland's leading political figures to answer the questions put to them by Scotland's newest generation of voters. 100,000 16 and 17-year-olds registered to vote. Nearly 7,500 young people are here. 219 schools, from Ullapool in the north to Castle Douglas in the south. The biggest ever event of its kind in Scotland.
I've been really excited because a lot of us are still undecided, so we hope today's the day that we can finally make a decision.
A question I'm wanting answered, as well as many people in my year, I think, is uncertainty about the currency still. There's still some questions that need to be answered, and I think that's something I want to hear today.
I would just like to know what I could get from it, like education-wise, if it's still going to be free or whatever. I would just like to know proper facts about that.
Tonight, they're seeking answers on Scotland Decides, the big debate. I'm joined by four panellists who've been nominated by the rival campaigns as their official representatives this evening. From Yes Scotland, Deputy First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and co-convener of the Scottish Green Party, Patrick Harvie. And the nominated representatives from the Better Together campaign, leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, and the Respect MP, George Galloway. An audience of 500 from all over Scotland has been selected to sit on the floor of this arena and take part in the main debate. And they are evenly divided between supporters of independence on one side and opponents on the other, plus some who are undecided. Tonight's questions all come from our audience, and the panel have not seen them. So let's take the first question from Amy Ronald of Stewarton Academy in East Ayrshire.
How would independence affect job opportunities for school leavers and university graduates?
Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, independence gives Scotland control over economic levers, and one of the reasons I want Scotland to be independent is so that we can create more job opportunities for our young people. There's nothing wrong with young people wanting to leave Scotland for a while to see the world, to spread their wings, but right now, something like 40,000 of our young people leave Scotland every single year, many of them because they can't find the opportunities and the jobs and the career progression here. So if we've got control over our economic levers, we can create more opportunities, encourage more companies to set up in Scotland, to expand in Scotland, to create jobs for all of you and your fellow young people across this country. When I look out at this audience just now, I can't help having my immense confidence in the ability of this country to be independent totally affirmed. You're the future of Scotland, and you're the reason that an independent Scotland will be a roaring success.
Ruth Davidson.
Well, I agree that looking out here today, I mean, this is a phenomenal sight, not just the 500 on the floor, but the 7,000 that are in the gallery as well. And the engagement from Scotland's young people has been immense, but so has their level of information and informed debate. And people in Scotland of any age know that there are many jobs in Scotland that exist because we work with people from other parts of the United Kingdom. 180,000 financial services jobs in Scotland, for example. 9 out of 10 pension products and insurance products sold in Scotland are sold to the rest of the UK. In manufacturing, we sell twice as much to the rest of the UK as we sell to the rest of the world combined. So you take your Americas and your Japans and your Frances and your Germanys, your Australia, add it all up, double it, and you still don't sell as much there as we do to England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And I think if you look at the history of our country, we've always worked together with people elsewhere, and lots of Scottish companies have set up shop down south, and lots of companies from down south employ people up here. And what I don't want to see is double regulation. I don't want to see barriers to that, and I don't want to see red tape. I think young people leaving schools and universities right now know that there are opportunities which exist because we're part of the United Kingdom, and many of them want to choose jobs exactly in that area.
OK, Patrick Harvey.
I think there are two big problems that make the challenges for young people setting out on their career paths much worse at the moment. One is the austerity economics that's coming from the UK government, so that jobs in the public sector and very often in the voluntary sector as well are being squeezed for finances. And it's only when Scotland controls its own finances that we'll be able to challenge that. But also economic policy that centralises so much power in the private sector as well. So many parts of our economy, from banking to energy to food and retail, are dominated by a tiny number of vast businesses crowding out space which could be taken up by the flourishing of independent, entrepreneurial, creative people like all of you in your careers. I think we need to change both these two things, the centralisation of power in our economy as well as the austerity economics from the UK. If I saw an alternative coming from the UK, I might even be on the other side of this debate, but I see no prospect that we can change these things without a yes vote next week.
George Galloway, how would independence affect job opportunities for school leavers and university graduates?
Well, there are too many barriers and boundaries and borders in the world already without erecting new ones in the second decade of the 21st century, and young people know that better than any other section of the community. The austerity that Patrick talks about, out of which we are now finally coming, with an election coming up in Britain in the spring, has been a terrible time. But it says nothing to what will happen if the disruption, and I believe destruction, of separation takes place. Indeed, it's already begun. Just this week, billions of pounds, billions, has been wiped off the share price of Scottish-based companies. Money is flowing out of Edinburgh, out of the banks, south of what may soon be a real border. And the banks themselves announcing, and insurance companies, as they are legally obliged to do, that they will relocate their headquarters in England because they're obliged to headquarter where the majority of their customers live.
That's not what they're saying, George.
If you are hoping for a job in financial services, in the new modern technologies, it must make sense to keep together one 300-year-old country with strength and with a critical mass of population, rather than following the nationalists down the yellow brick road to separation.
I'd like to make this debate this evening as much about... Hang on a second, Nicholas Sturgeon. I'd like to make this debate this evening as much about the audience as possible. So we'll take a few points and then I'll come back up here. So I'd like to go back to Amy Ronald first of all. Amy, what do you think of what you've heard so far?
Yeah, that was really helpful, thank you.
From whom? Who was the most helpful?
Nicholas Sturgeon.
All right, OK, thank you very much. Let's go over here to the man in the middle with his hand up and the green blazer. Yes.
Should we not have power of our own job-creating power so we can make job-creating powers that actually will benefit our country for ourselves, instead of allowing Westminster to do it? And George...
Okay. You're going quickly, yeah.
And George, we're not creating any physical boundaries or borders. Exactly. We're creating a political separation, and that's what it should be about. No, it shouldn't be about misleading Scottish children.
Thank you. We'll go over here and into the middle. Yes, right there. Yeah. Yes.
Last week, 2 large Scottish banks have vowed to move their headquarters south of the border if we go independent. And also the SNP-backed policy of moving Trident south of the border will all decrease the amount of jobs there are in Scotland. So how can Nicola say that this will attract more jobs for young people, whereas it has actively pushed jobs out just at the thought of an independent Scotland.
Let's ask her.
Well, I'm firstly just trying to get over hearing George Galloway, the socialist, tell all you young people you should be intimidated by the financial markets. Actually, in truth, the share prices of most publicly listed Scottish companies rose on Tuesday. And let's just be accurate in this debate. The banks themselves today are saying that the contingency plans that they've drawn up, and that's what they are, contingency plans, don't involve moving their headquarters. They involve moving their brass plates, their registered offices, and the banks say they don't involve moving any jobs. So if the banks say that, let's not have scaremongering from the no parties on this side.
Let's put that point to
lastly,
Davidson.
We will be better as a country if we can invest money in creating opportunity rather than waste money on weapons of mass destruction on the River Clyde.
Ruth Davidson, Royal Bank of Scotland, I mean, the gentleman's right. They said they would move their registered headquarters to London, and the Chief Executive in a letter to staff today says they have no intention to move operations or jobs.
Yeah, and yet Standard Life said it was. It had already set up shell companies over the border to move operations and jobs into. So that's Standard Life. RBS said it's moving headquarters. Lloyds Bank said it's moving headquarters.
No, it didn't.
Then TSB said it. And then Tesco Bank, before we came out today, said that they are moving their headquarters. And if anybody wants to look at what Nicola has said about headquarters of Scottish companies moving in the past, all you need to do is Google Nicola Sturgeon, 2005, BBC, Scottish Power. When she said that when she thought that Scottish Power would move their headquarters, there would be inevitable job losses to go with that.
You're the leader of the Conservative. You're the leader of the Conservative Party in Scotland. I would have thought you would have understood the difference between headquarters and registered offices. What you've just said there is flatly wrong. The banks are not saying they will move their headquarters. Lloyds Bank, for example, its headquarters is already in London. And if the banks are saying that what they've said today doesn't involve moving. Tesco Bank also said that it didn't affect jobs. So if they can say that, why are you, as the No campaign, insisting on trying to scare people?
There are 5,000 people employed by Standard Life. They say they're moving operations. Why are those 5,000 jobs not of interest to you?
But the point is, they are not saying they are moving jobs, and you're misleading people.
Hang on, give it a minute, Tamsa,
Young people have got a choice to make. You can decide a week today that you want to take control of the future of this country into your own hands, or you can choose to be intimidated by the parties in the No campaign.
Right.
Take control.
Thank you. Let's take a point from the man in the blue blazer. Yes, in the middle. Thank you.
Going back to what George said about how Scottish companies have lost out due to independence, my dad's an independent chartered surveyor, and over the last year he has seen significant loss in his turnover due to the fact that international companies are not willing to invest in Scotland. Why is an independent Scotland a good thing? Surely we've not even had the referendum yet, yet Scottish companies are losing out.
Thank you. I'll take one more point and I'll come to you, George Galloway, if you don't mind. On the edge, the woman in the glasses, right at the end. Yes, there you are.
Can I just point out to George Galloway that this is not an SNP campaign, it's much wider than that. You've got Radical Independence, you've got Green for Independence, you've got SSP, Women for Independence, Generation Yes. It's not a nationalist campaign.
George Galloway.
Well, that's a distinction without a difference, because if you vote yes, you get Alex Salmond and you get Nicola Sturgeon. That's the truth of it. I know you don't like me pointing that out, yes supporters, because you know that most people in Scotland really don't fancy that. But that's the truth of it. Now, the young man whose father is a surveyor, it's hardly surprising you're the only people in history to be asked to create a separate country that doesn't have a currency, doesn't have money. How could there not be uncertainty? You don't have money. That's the truth.
Isn't that the truth, Pat?
Listen.
Very quickly, and then I'll put that to Patrick Harvey.
No, please. I mean, the two women have had quite a share of it up to now. Let me just make this point. If you use another country's money, you're just a colony, like Panama or like Gibraltar. If you use money that's controlled by other people, you're not independent at all. Yet that is Alex Salmond's Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D.
Thank you. Patrick Harvey.
Look, aside from people shouting at each other about this, I thought it was just a couple of years ago since everybody right across the political spectrum was united in their anger and revulsion at the misdeeds of the banks themselves, the very same people who are trying to threaten and intimidate us now. The opportunity here is to build something different. Some of these banks, the public already owns them. The public bailed them out after their historic market failure. If the public already owns them, we should be transforming them into genuinely local banks, banks which invest in the real economy, in the jobs that we do need, instead of gambling their money, which is to say your money, on the casino economy globally. Now, George may not understand the distinction between nationalism and the independence movement, which is diverse and inclusive. It's become a compelling movement, I think, in Scotland. He may be tired of hearing the women speak, but just remember, he's also someone who doesn't know the distinction between rape and what he called bad sexual etiquette. I think you should reject the arguments of someone like that entirely.
Thank you. Do you very briefly want to respond to that final accusation?
Have you no decency, sir? Have you no idea of how important this decision next Thursday is? To scrape the gutter of lies in that way?
I've read your own words on the subject.
That's not why these people are here.
Your own
words. That's
words.
not what people are voting on next Thursday.
Thank you both.
Have you
Thank
no
you both.
decency,
Thank
sir?
you.
Your own words.
Have you no decency?
All of you, thank you very much. You've made your point about that. We're going to move on to the next question because there's so much to get to. I know, I hear that. You've also made your reply. Thank you both very much. Let's go down to the Glasgow Gaelic School and Ailey Macaulay, who has our next question. Ailey.
If Scotland stays as part of the UK, will we eventually have to pay tuition fees for higher education?
Will Scots have to pay tuition fees for higher education if Scotland stays as part of the UK? Ruth Davidson.
Well, if this audience is 16 and 17-year-olds for almost your entire life, for 15 years, education has wholly been the preserve of the Scottish Parliament. So for the last 7 years, Nicola and Alex Salmond and the rest of the party have been running the Scottish education system in their entirety. So the decisions that are made about education are made here in Scotland. So it's been Nicola and Alex's decision to cut over 100,000 college places across Scotland.
130,000.
Actually, it's closer to 140,000, but I was being generous to them. It's their decision to do that. In terms of what we're having is more powers coming to Scotland over how you raise money and how much income comes to Scotland, so there will be even more discretion in Scotland over things like health and education. But don't let the nationalists fool you. For 15 years, the Scottish Parliament has been in entire control of the health service, of education, of policing, of all of the services that we have today in Scotland. So this isn't someone else's tough decision that has to be made. It's our decision here in Scotland, irrespective of whether you vote yes or whether you vote no.
And given that it's our decision, don't forget you can get involved in tonight's debate in a number of ways. You can text your views to 80295, you can email them to referendumdebate@bbc.co.uk, and if you're on social media, use the hashtag #BigBigDebate. A selection of your texts, emails and tweets will appear on the BBC News website. Go to bbc.co.uk/Scotland Decides. Nicola Sturgeon, if Scotland stays as part of the UK, will we have to pay tuition fees for higher education?
Well, Ruth is right to some extent. Education policy is devolved, and that's why I'm very proud that the SNP Scottish Government, unlike Team Tory over here, unlike the Scottish Labour Party, who haven't even had the guts to send somebody to come and talk to you tonight, we've kept university education free. I feel really strongly about this subject. I grew up in the west of Scotland in a working class family. If I'd had to pay tuition fees, I'd never have got to university. I had the privilege of a free education, and I've got no right to take it away from any of you. So yes, we've got policy control. But what we don't have right now is financial control. We don't control our own budget. Our budget's been cut by 7% in recent years. We know the Tories want to cut our budget even more. And the danger is, if our budget continues to get cut, our budget in what is one of the wealthiest countries in the world, it gets harder and harder for us to protect the things that matter. So we need to match up that policy control with control over our own budgets. We're the 14th richest country in the world. There's no reason we can't protect free education, but we're better able to do it if we're an independent country.
Thank you. Let's go to the woman with the blonde hair in the second row. Yes.
I just feel like Ruth's answer to that question was not a yes or a no. Like, she didn't sum up
That's
whether we're
because
paying
it's
tuition
already
fees.
control. Yeah, it's because it's already in our control. That doesn't change whether there's a yes or no answer.
Okay, thank
whether
you.
you make the
Thank
decision either way.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Let's
making
go
Scotland right now.
right to the back, and someone in purple, a purple hand is up, way at the back of the room there with glasses. Yes.
Ruth never answered the question. She never answered whether it would be protected. We could vote in a different government into the Scottish Parliament. It might not be the SNP. How do we know if they're going to protect it?
Okay, thank you. And on the edge there, in the middle, yes, the woman there, yes.
On the topic of tuition fees, I would be planning on going down to London to go to college and university, and I was wondering, would I need to pay international rates? Because if I would, then I can't afford it and I can't go to college.
Thank you. We'll take one more, and then we'll come back up here to the panel. And the man in the middle of those cluster of hands up, yes, yeah, you pointing at your own head. That is you. You're on, sir.
Ruth, you said that we would be given more powers, yet it's members of your party, such as Boris Johnson, who said, in the event of a no vote, we will receive no powers.
Okay.
Boris Johnson's not even an MP.
Thank
We're
you.
absolutely committed. The Prime Minister was up yesterday. All of the three party leaders from the unionist parties. The only party that's handed powers back to Westminster has been the SNP. We used to have power over raising or lowering taxes by 3 pence in the pound. For people like your parents who voted in the 1999 referendum, it was the will of the Scottish people that we kept that power, and the SNP handed it back.
George Galloway, you're nodding in agreement with your Conservative colleague.
Well, the answer to the question is that will be a decision for the Scottish people, whether you're independent or not. Because either you'll be independent and you'll make that decision, or you'll have universities controlled by a Scottish Parliament within a British state, and you'll have the power to decide to make that choice. I'm actually very concerned about the 130,000 college places for the most working class students that were cut by Nicola Sturgeon in order to pay for the free university tuition fees. But the budget that she talks about doesn't even have a currency attached to it. She talks about our budget, but we don't know whether that budget is going to be in euros or groats.
It'll be in pounds, George.
No, I can assure you. No. Well, you talked about the incongruity of me as a socialist earlier. How incongruous is it that the champion of Scottish nationalism is absolutely desperate to keep the English pound?
It's our
and
pound.
And that you are cheering for it.
It's Scotland's
you on
pound.
the yes side. No, let me make this point.
If you would briefly, and then we'll bring in Patrick Harvey. Thank you.
Let me finish
briefly,
the point that I was making. Your currency, whatever it is called, is predicated upon the most price unstable commodity in the world, and which is fast running out. That's what she's hiding from you. By the time you're my age, there won't be any oil on which to hold a currency.
Most independent countries
bank.
don't have oil
There'll be
at
no
all.
Let's come to Patrick Harvey. I want to put this to Patrick Harvey.
Fantasy
Mr. Galloway,
economics.
thank you.
Fantasy economics.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Patrick Harvey.
Yeah,
let's go back to tuition fees, if we could.
I may be
misremembering
misremembering this, but there was a question about tuition fees a few minutes ago, and I think it didn't really get answered. The principle that you or the next generation of young people should be given a deal that says, yes, you can have a higher education, but you're going to end up 20, 30, 40,000 pounds in debt or deeper by the time you get a degree. I think that is a scandal. The next principle that some will argue is that, yes, you can get a higher education if you can get a big business like KPMG or somebody else to sponsor your degree. That will be a scandal when that comes in. And it is fantastic that Scotland so far has been able to hold out against that commodification of your education. I think it's something that we need to hold fast to. I once asked a group of students protesting outside Glasgow Uni to vote against me at any time in my career if I ever vote for tuition fees in Scotland. And I ask that of every one of you again. But if we're going to protect that, Scotland also needs control of its own finances. Our public services, we can make that policy commitment to invest in them, to carry on doing that. But we need to control our finances as well if we're going to be able to carry through that commitment.
Thank you. People are very, very keen to speak on this issue. So I'd like to go right to the edge. Yes.
This campaign want independence so badly. Do they wish to keep all the benefits of the union, such as the pound? It's like asking for a divorce but want to keep the same joint bank account.
Thank you. And we'll go into the middle of this cluster here. And, yeah, the man with his hand up to the right of the three of you there. Yeah, there's three of you in the middle with it. Yeah, yes, yeah, go on.
If Scotland stays in the UK, what will its policy on immigration be?
OK, let's try to stick on tuition fees just for the minute, if that's all right. And we'll come into the middle here. Yeah, yes, you, sir, in the middle.
How can you guarantee that your policy will continue if you're going to keep tuition fees, if you might not even get into power if we go independent?
You can guarantee that in the way that you vote.
But even if I vote for it, doesn't mean you're still going to get into power and I'm going to get tuition fees. You can't guarantee that whether we're independent or not, so how can you use that as an argument?
What I can guarantee is that without independence, any Scottish government you vote for, Nicola's party, my party, the Labour Party who haven't turned up tonight, any party that you vote for will be unable to control Scotland's finances. And so when the UK government takes money out of the pot, that comes out of the Scottish pot as well.
Sorry,
and if we want to protect public services, it's got to come from somewhere else.
I'll come to you. I want to go back. Are you convinced by that?
Not really, no.
OK, thank you, Ruth Davidson.
Well, I think what Patrick's not telling you is that independent experts, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, have said that to have independence, there would be £6 billion black hole. There would be £6 billion more cuts per year than there have been right now. And I think what Nicola hasn't told you is that in terms of cash, the budget of Parliament has gone up in Scotland every single year. She has more than twice as much to spend as Donald Dewar did in the first Parliament. And if politics is about priorities, why has she cut so much money to colleges? Why has, and I'll quote this now again from the IFS, the Scottish Government has chosen to protect NHS in Scotland slightly less than it has protected it in England. It is hard to see how independence could allow Scotland to spend more in the NHS than within a union. So talking about public services, money has been coming up the road. It's been health money. It was supposed to be spent on health up here. Alex Salmond said he would spend it on health, and he hasn't done it. That's what the IFS has told today. So politics is about decision-making, and I think she's making the wrong ones.
OK, a point there in the just the second row back. Yes, with the blue tie. Yeah.
Would it not make it easier for Scotland to have more jobs if people can get better education by having free education?
OK, thank you. And 1 point here near the back of the hall. Yes.
See, if Scotland does become independent, then where we'll be able to get the money to afford to be able to get free tuition for university.
That's the nub of it, isn't it, Nicola Sturgeon?
That's what I wanted to come back on. Ruth said money's been coming up from down the road. See the money that comes up from down the road? It first goes down the road from all of us. It's our taxes.
So it was health consequentials.
And then what happens?
You promised to spend on health.
And then what happens
is
Westminster decides how much of our own money finds its way back to Scotland, and they've been cutting that in recent years in real terms. Now, Ruth earlier on pretended she didn't know the difference between a registered office and a headquarters. Clearly she's now trying to pretend she doesn't know about inflation. Our money's been getting cut in real terms. Now, you know what independence is all about, and it answers the girls' question over here. We pay our taxes, the same taxes as we pay right now, but instead of sending them to London for them to decide the priorities for spending them, we keep them here and we decide the priorities like health, like free education, and not trident nuclear weapons.
Ruth Davidson.
And that's exactly what voting no thanks in the ballot paper will give you, because the powers that are coming are coming over. The powers that are coming over income tax. So it is about the Scottish Parliament deciding where to spend taxes. But Nicola's being disingenuous here, because she likes to say that she's put health spending up every year, talking about cash terms rather than real terms. So let's all get on the same page. You've been putting health spending up less than has been going on in England and Wales. That's what the IFS said. That is what they have said today. I read out the exact
Why don't we start this and let us keep our own money and set all of our own priorities?
Because we are part of a wider union which allows us to pool and share resources. So there are 63 million people backing up the public spending. That is why public spending in Scotland is £1,200 more per head than it is in the rest of the UK. Now, they're talking over me, so you don't hear this. That is why public spending in Scotland is £1,200 per head more than the rest of the UK, because we pay, we pool and share resources.
Right, we're not going to get anywhere if we talk over each other. Let's take another question. Craig Easton from Bathgate Academy in West Lothian. Craig Easton.
Oil is expected to run out by the year 2050, where many of us will be grandparents. So who or what will pay our pensions?
George Galloway.
Actually, it's going to run out long before that. First of all, the revenue will have by 2018. And according to Sir Ian Wood, who's made £1 billion fortune out of North Sea oil, regarded as one of the top oil exports in the world, there will be a sharp reduction by the year 21, and that it will all be done by 2030. Now, you can believe Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon, or you can believe one of the world's top oil experts who was forced to come into this debate because of the disingenuity, I'll use your polite parliamentary term, of the nationalist argument. I'm telling you, this is all moonshine. It's fantasy economics based on a product which has been as low as $12 a barrel in my lifetime and as high as $156 a barrel in my lifetime. It's now less than 100 today. Nobody knows what it will be tomorrow or next year or next decade. I'll be dead and gone by the time it runs out. All of you will still be alive, God willing. All of you will still be alive, and the oil will be gone, and all this moonshine fantasy economics will look very hollow indeed.
Patrick Harvey. Patrick Harvey, I mean, the truth is it not, that you'd happily not use any of the oil at all?
Well, no, I think it would be absurd, even from the deepest green point of view, to say we can't use any oil at all, or that you could shut down an industry like that overnight. But very clearly, the world has far more fossil fuels than it can afford to burn.
How quickly do you want to shut down that
That's something that every fossil fuel producing country around the world, Scotland or the UK and many others, are going to have to come to terms with, leaving a lot of it in the ground, or at least diverting it to non-fuel petrochemical uses.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well,
how quickly do you want to do that?
My view is that you could scrap the huge tax breaks that are being given by the UK government to the industry for future exploration, looking for new reserves that we can't afford to burn, and invest instead in the renewable alternative. Maximise revenue in the short term, not extraction in the long term. Make sure that we're investing in the renewable alternative so that it's not just owned by a bunch of multinationals, but some of it's owned by the public sector, some of it's owned by the community sector, so that the wealth of that incredible growing energy economy will be shared more fairly throughout our whole society.
Harvey,
That's the transition we need to be on.
I will take some points and then we'll come back up here. So the woman here with the blue tie and the badge on your tie, yes. Literally it says yes, doesn't it?
Yeah. How can you claim we're better together when 1 in 3 children in Glasgow live in poverty?
Okay, thank you. And on the topic of oil and pensions, if we can try to stick to that, it was can oil fund the pensions? Yes, near the front here, thank you.
How can you guarantee how much money we're going to get from this oil? How can you guarantee that it's always going to stay the same price and people are going to pay the same money for it?
Okay, thank you. And the man who's just two in, near the back.
Seems as you've clearly lied to the majority of the Scottish population about how much oil is actually in the North Sea.
Who's lied, sorry?
The SNP, because their predictions were about 60% off, according to Ian Wood, who's an industry expert. How can we trust whatever policy the SNP are putting forward if the main source of our income has been a lie, effectively?
Well, Westminster has been telling the people of Scotland that oil was about to run out since the moment oil was discovered, since long before any of you were born. They told us it was meant to have run out by now. The truth of the matter is there are billions of barrels of oil left to be extracted. Even taking Ian Wood's estimate of 16 billion barrels of oil, that's got a wholesale value of £1 trillion. Yesterday we heard one of the serious experts on oil in this country, Professor Alec Kemp, talk about the many new discoveries that are predicted over the next number of years. What we're having in Scotland right now is a debate about whether we've got lots of oil or lots and lots and lots of oil. And most successful independent countries don't have any oil. There's 2 points I think you need to think about. One is the decision for us is how we better steward our oil reserves over the next 40, 50, 60 years and beyond. Because we right now, as part of the UK, are one of only 2 oil-producing countries in the world that doesn't have an oil fund, that doesn't have something to show future generations.
And the final point
is, oil's a bonus in our economy. It makes up 15% of all of our tax revenues. In Norway, it's 30%. Have you ever heard anybody say that because it's got so much oil, Norway's not capable of being independent?
Okay.
Of course you haven't.
Okay, Ruth Davidson. Ruth Davidson, and then you, Mr. Galloway.
What Nicola didn't say, well, she didn't address the point about Sir Ian Wood at all. It's not Westminster saying it's running out, it's industry experts like Sir Ian Wood. And
Sir Ian Wood, I tell you while you're there, hang on, Ruth Davidson. No, because this is important, because he's been mentioned several times. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to want to put this to both of you, because you've both cited him. Sir Ian Wood said in 2012, my headline message for the youth of today, get involved, the North Sea oil industry will see you through your lifetime.
And he also said that the SNP have overestimated oil budgets by 60%. We've had BP today. BP believes that the future prospects for North Sea are best served by maintaining the existing capacity and integrity of the United Kingdom. But here's what Nicola doesn't tell you. In a 650-page white paper, there is 1 page of figures. And everything that she wants to spend money on is predicated on oil, and the oil price being $113 a barrel. As George has said, it's less than 100. Do you know, since humans crawled out of the swamp, grew legs and started walking, how many months oil has been at over $113 a barrel? 4 months. In the history of humanity in the world has oil traded at more than $113 a barrel, and that's what she's trying to build a new Scotland on. The amount of money that we spend on welfare alone in Scotland is more than the entire tax take from the entire North Sea. So the North Sea's not paying for schools or hospitals, it's paying for welfare and pensions. So also, if you look at the entire North Sea, you look at the one more point, more money was wiped off Scottish companies on the stock market on Monday in a single day than the entire tax take from the entire North Sea in a year. So her pretending that oil will pay for everything is nonsense. It's a fantasy, and she needs to get real with the people of Scotland.
I'll give you a chance to reply in a moment, but there are so many people with their hands up, and this debate is about our audience. So let's go, just on the edge here. Yes, about 4 rows back and on the edge.
Personally, I can't see how anyone can trust the Westminster government's reputation when it comes to spending oil money. Firstly, the wealth of the oil was hidden from us through the Macron report was hidden from us, which said that we would have had oil reserves that were worth more than the oil reserves of Saudi Arabia. Instead, the money was squandered and spent on Westminster privatisation and the miners' strike.
OK, that's a UK government report from back in the 1970s. Let's go to also on the edge, just further back with your hand on the edge.
Yes, Scotland are constantly comparing Scotland to the Scandinavian countries, but they fail to take into account that the Scandinavian countries pay about 46% tax. So how is Scotland ever going to be able to pay that much tax when there's so many people living on the breadline?
OK, thank you. And in the brown blazer here, yes, thank you.
Is the SNP really thinking in the long term about using oil as a source of income for Scotland? As we know in this world that's already advancing, that the time the oil's actually going to last is going down every day. We're taking it out and the world's using more and more oil, so is it really going to last the 40, 50 years they're actually predicting?
Thank you, and there's so many hands up here just in this back quarter, and I can't really see all of you, so just whoever shouts loudest can ask the question. Go.
Earlier on, Ruth Davidson spoke about extra powers for Scotland. Why was Devo Max taken off the ballot paper?
OK,
Nicola,
thank you.
She negotiated the question.
OK, I'll answer that if you want. When I went in to negotiate the Edinburgh Agreement, the Secretary of State for Scotland said more powers on the ballot paper was a red line for the Westminster government. They weren't prepared to countenance it.
Did you want them?
You had a huge division within your own party because you thought you couldn't get a yes vote if there was 3 options. So the fundamentalists in the SNP were at the gradualist's throat on this one.
The question was who prevented more powers being on the ballot paper. The answer to the question is the Westminster Government. That's why you can't trust them to deliver more powers now.
Absolutely. We've already delivered more powers to the Scotland Act that you voted for. Nicola, you sat in the chamber and you voted for more powers to Scotland.
More powers.
You voted for it, so don't tell us that we don't fulfil our promises, because we did.
It's no longer good enough for Scotland
Quickly.
to accept crumbs from the Westminster table. It's time to take control of our own future.
This is about autonomy
Vote
over
yes
spending,
and
but
decide
still
what
keeping
more
the
powers we
security
have
of our armed
ourselves.
forces, being part of something bigger.
George Galloway, would you like to have a word?
Any chance of getting a word
Would you like to have a word?
Any chance of getting a word in here? The young woman who said that 1 in 3 children in Glasgow were living in poverty. There's children living in poverty throughout this land. And I'm not prepared to slam the door, to get onto a lifeboat and leave them behind. I'm as concerned about food banks in Birmingham or Bradford or Newcastle or Liverpool as I am about them in Glasgow, and the equanimity with which Scottish nationalists are ready to leave them behind to the tender mercies of a Tory government in perpetuity is quite stunning in my view. I wouldn't like you to misrepresent Sir Ian Wood. Sir Ian Wood said there will be a sharp reduction in North Sea oil production in 21 years' time, and that it will be finished in 30 years' time. Now, that is my lifetime, but I'm not here arguing for my lifetime, but for their lifetime and the lifetime of their children.
All right.
That's what I'm here arguing for. And finally, James, extra powers may not be on the ballot paper, but they are on the table. There's a super Devo, never mind Devo Max. There is super Devo on the table now. You'd be crazy to turn it down. You'd be crazy to turn it down and to opt instead for divorce. Listen, I've been divorced. More than once, actually. Divorce is a nasty, acrimonious, and very damaging business. And it's especially damaging for the children. And you don't get divorced, or shouldn't get divorced, unless there's absolutely no alternative to doing so.
Thank you,
so
George
I'm
Galloway.
saying
Thank
you're
you.
better together.
Thank you.
Just say no.
Now, I would like to hear what you have to say on this. Remember, you can tweet about tonight's programme using the hashtag #BigBigDebate. You can email your thoughts to referendumdebate@bbc.co.uk. You can text 80295. Let's move on to the next question, which comes from Abby Purnell of Alva Academy in Clackmannanshire.
If we stay in the UK, will privatisation of parts of the NHS be inevitable?
Will NHS privatisation, or at least partly, be inevitable if Scotland stays in the UK? Patrick Harvey.
Well, much like the debate on higher education, what we've got to recognise is that there's a difference between being able to control policy on something like the NHS and being able to control Scotland's finances. Now, at the moment, the UK government is dead set on breaking up and privatising the structure itself of the NHS, not just buying in a few services to fill the gaps. That's happened for a long time, for a very long time. Even GPs are not part of the publicly owned NHS. But they're privatising the very structure of it. Now, if that leads in the longer term to more introduction of fees and charges, if it leads to a decline in the public resources that are going in, that will impact on the Scottish budget. If, as well, if it results in this nasty, competitive, profit-driven motive which degrades the quality of care that people are getting, there's a danger that that could be locked in at EU level. There's a trade deal being negotiated between the EU and the US, which could lock in that profit-driven model. So Scotland needs control of its finances, and it needs its own voice at a European level if we're going to resist both pressure on our budget for services like the NHS and the privatisation by stealth, the marketisation, the handing over of a public good, a public service to profit-driven companies.
I want to ask this man here what he thinks. Yes.
We already have a free NHS, we already have free education, so why risk everything and why change it when we already have all this set up?
Okay, thank you. And with the glasses, yes. You know, the woman with the glasses.
how you can be talking about trust when the Yes campaign's whole tactics for gaining votes is all about lies and misinformation and scare tactics.
In what way?
So how can you talk about trust when your campaign isn't based on any type of trust?
Do you mean in terms of the NHS? Is that...
Not on terms of lots of things that they've said. A lot of the campaign ads have been lies and just been scare tactics to get people to vote yes.
Thank you.
How is that appropriate?
Thank you. I'll come to you in a minute. We'll go over to this side of the room. The man waggling his hand, as you're waggling your hand with the glasses, yes.
Well, currently, over the past few years, the Scottish Government has already had its budget cut in real terms by about 7%, so it's already having to make savings. We vote no, the Barnett formula is going to be scrapped. That's going to be £4 billion taken away from the Scottish Government. That money will have to come from healthcare, policing, schools. Unless we vote for independence, we'll have to do whatever the UK government tells us to do.
OK, thank you. And the man with his hand very high and the red wristband now clapping with your hands in the air. Yes.
Like the guy said earlier on, yeah, we already have free tuition, but it's not whether we should be risking it, it's whether we should settle for that. We should be able to do better for our country, not take for granted what we've already got.
Well said.
Well said. Thank you very much, George Galloway.
Listen, we would never have had a National Health Service, never have had one, if it wasn't for two things. A Labour government in 1945 and a country big enough to make a big enough pot to share resources across the country in order to have healthcare free at the point of need. Secondly, the National Health Service is an entirely devolved matter. It could only be privatised if people were foolish enough to elect a Scottish government that was ready to privatise it. And thirdly, as Ruth Davidson candidly, though probably unwisely, conceded just the other day, the Tories will be out in the spring. The privatisation agenda will be dead in the spring. A Labour government, like the one that created the NHS in the first place, will be here next May, not in 5 years, but in May. Now,
you're supporting that Labour government.
Labour has turned up tonight. I'm speaking for real Labour values, which are shared by millions of people across this country.
Here, the woman with the glasses and the blue blazer and the blue tie, yes.
The Conservative government might be dead in the spring, but that's what we got told last time when Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government will just re-come again and we'll be under this pressure yet again.
OK, thank you. And the woman on the edge here, yeah.
We do give our taxes to England, but we get more back. So how are we going to afford all this NHS and private education if we're getting less money as an independent Scotland when, as we are within the UK, we get more money back?
Scotland gets a higher share of public spending than the UK average, does it not?
Well, Ruth quoted a figure earlier on. She said public spending per head in Scotland was £1,200 higher. She's right about that. 1 in 5 of our population live in a rural community. It costs more to deliver health services in rural communities. But what she didn't say was that in the year she quotes that figure from, the tax we generated per head of population was £1,700 higher. We are not subsidised. We do not get back more than we pay in. Don't ever let anyone tell you that is true.
Hang on, no, that's important on that point, because the point that might be slightly misleading to some people, because we do not have enough money, do we? We're subsidised by debt.
Well, Scotland, as an independent country, would be in deficit. The UK is in deficit to the tune of £100 billion right now. Deficits are not barriers to countries being independent. If they were, there would be very few independent countries in the world right now. A deficit is a reason to be independent, to get your hands on the levers of economic powers so you can grow your economy and increase the wealth you have as a country. Can I come back to the NHS, something I, like so many people, care about deeply? George said there's a Labour government coming next spring. How many times has Scotland voted Labour only to end up with the Tories? Why should we have to cross our fingers? Why should we have to cross our fingers and hope for a Labour government when we can vote yes and guarantee that we always get the governments we vote for? And on the NHS, I used to be responsible for the health service in Scotland. I know how hard it is to protect the budget of the health service when our overall budget is being reduced by Westminster. I will fight with every breath in my body to keep the National Health Service in public hands, but we are going to be more able to do that when we have control of our own budget so that we set our own priorities. That is the benefit of independence.
I'm glad that Nicola has finally admitted that she has been in charge of the health service, in charge of where money goes, that she was in charge as the amount of private suppliers to the NHS in Scotland rocketed, that she was in charge.
Less than 1%.
And she's still not answered the quote from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, who run the numbers, who said that health spending and health consequentials that got sent up to Scotland weren't spent on health. And I will read it again. The Scottish Government has chosen to protect the NHS in Scotland less than it has been protected in England. That's not me saying that. That is the Institute of Fiscal Studies that ran the numbers. Health money got sent up. You promised it would be spent on health. It hasn't been spent on health. Scottish NHS is getting a bad deal from the SNP.
Well, you're on the same campaign and we're running out of time, and I really like Patrick Harvey to have a contribution. So, Mr Harvey, how would you answer that?
What's the...
Well, the point that Ruth Davidson
Institute of Fiscal Study report today.
Well, I mean, the reality is that, even according to some of the no side, everybody has agreed that Scotland is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. I am frankly bored of the debate about whether we're a tiny bit richer or a tiny bit poorer on average, because on average is not most people's experience. On average, in a chronically unequal society, means very little, because so much of the wealth of our society is not funding public services, is not building a better environment, is not investing in the jobs that you will all need as you go out of school and into the world. So much of the wealth of our society, of our economy, which should be democratically accountable, is being hoarded by the wealthiest. If we were not a fraction richer, but a great deal fairer, that would be tremendously to the benefit of the vast majority of ordinary people. The ability to invest in the common experience, in the public good, rather than in the wealth of those who hoard their wealth away in tax havens or elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, if you all promise to give a short answer, we'll take one more question, all right? You have to, this is a deal. You have to subscribe to this deal, and we'll go to Isla Crombie-Surgeon of Dalkeith High School for the final answer. Final question.
I am currently undecided as to which way to vote on the 18th of September. Which succinct statement would the Yes and Better Together campaigns like to make that would help me make my decision?
Who would you like to go to first?
The Yes campaign, please.
OK, Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, voting yes puts control of the future of our country into our own hands. It's not a magic wand. We'll have challenges as a country, ups and downs, but we'll have control of our own resources, and we'll make the decisions that shape the kind of country we are. That's what all independent countries do. It's what Scotland should do as well.
Thank you. That was succinct. Let's try to stick to that. Ruth Davidson.
At the moment, we're all proud to be Scottish. We have huge control over our health, over our education, over our policing. But we stand together with other people too. We stand with our friends in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. We have the most professional armed services in the world. I don't want to see that ripped apart. We're part of a £63 million market. Let's not turn our biggest customer into our biggest competitor overnight. We can be a better country without having to be a separate country. Let's all pull together to make that better country.
This is just a sentence, Patrick Harvey, just a sentence.
You've heard a lot about the bonds of friendship and family throughout these islands. I feel those bonds as well. I feel the solidarity across these islands as well. Part of my family, half my family comes from England. I studied in Manchester. I feel those bonds of friendship and family. If I thought independence was about breaking those bonds, listen to me, I would be voting no. I think this is not just about the ability to take responsibility for building a better Scotland, but as many of my colleagues and friends south of the border believe, it could spark the kind of democratic renewal that the rest of these islands have been waiting for a long time as well, demonstrating by our actions that a better way is possible, a better, fairer, greener society is possible. Let's take the chance and start building it.
Thank you. As short as you like, George Galloway.
How could you not break bonds by making other people foreigners, people who are citizens of the same country as us? No. How could you not break bonds by breaking up a country of English-speaking people, a small island, which has been together for 300 years, which has done many great things, some bad things, the greatest of which, in the last battle of Britain, was when, united, we stood alone against Hitler fascism. Yes. Well,
George Galloway, we have to finish it here.
Well, you can jeer, but ask your grandparents how important it was that as a united people, we stood alone in the world. Otherwise, we'd be having this conversation in German.
Thank you very much, George Galloway. Thank you so much, everyone here. And I'm afraid, believe it or not, we've already run out of time. My sincere thanks to our panel here and to our very special audience who've come to the SSE Hydro from schools all over Scotland. Often in these sorts of debates, the politicians get the final say in the form of closing speeches. But tonight, we have decided to give Scotland's young voters the last word. From Glasgow, good night.
Let none wake despondent.
One way or another, we have talked plainly.
Tested ourselves, weighed up the sum of our knowing.
Taken tent to scholars.
Check the balance sheet of risk and fearlessness.
Of wisdom and of folly.
Was it about the powers we gain or how we use them?
We aim for more equality.
And for tomorrow to be more peaceful than today.
For fairness, opportunity, the common weal.
A hand stretched out in ready hospitality.
It's those unseen things that bind us.
Not flag or battle-weary turf or tartan.
There are dragons to slay whatever happens.
Poverty, false pride, snobbery.
Sectarian schisms still hovering.
But there's nothing broken that's not repairable. We are a citizenry of bonny fighters, a gathered folk.
A culture that imparts, inspires, demands a rare devotion.
No backtracking.
That each should work and play our several parts.
To bring about the best in Scotland.
An open heart.